Marco Island. This is the Good Morning Marco podcast, the first, best, and only podcast on Marco Island. I'm your host, Ryan Sullivan.
I'm Jordan Crayley.
And today we have a wonderful guest.
I'm John R. Johnson with Down Goes Iguana.
John, I am so excited to have you on the podcast, as I have had about 12 different people send me one of the news articles that you were featured in within the past few weeks since it's come out, and everyone's been saying, you have to get John on the podcast. So I'm very excited for this episode.
Well, it's fun. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, anytime. Yeah. It's all about the community.
Wonderful, wonderful. Before we get into everything, the story of Marco Island's iguana hunter, we have a few housekeeping things. So first, let's take it to, now it's past Ryan, actually. So let's take it to past Ryan with today's sponsor.
This episode of Good Morning Marco is brought to you by Tyler Buchan of the Golf Group. Located right here on Marco Island, they're your go-to experts for luxury living on Marco Island and beyond. Whether you're looking for a waterfront home with golf access, a condo with stunning beach views, or a private retreat down on Hideaway Beach, Tyler and his team will guide you to your home. Visit thegolfgroup.com to start your search today, or call 239-420-1099. Once again, that number is 239-420-1099. Go to thegolfgroup.com to find out more. Thank you so much to Tyler and his team for sponsoring this episode of Good Morning Marco.
And if we have a second sponsor, do you want to say thanks, and let's take it to other Ryan?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, and let's take it to other Ryan.
Thank you so much to our wonderful sponsors for today's episode. So, John, let's just jump right into it. First, telling everybody to subscribe on YouTube and follow on all listening platforms, and of course to go to goodmorningmarco.com, buy merch and stuff. Anyway, so let's actually get into it now. How did this start? Because I've read the story, but I want to get it straight from the horse's mouth. How did you start? Just give us your elevator pitch of who you are and what it is that you do.
Oh, the start is as good a place as any to get started. So
there you go.
I moved onto the island like so many of us did. It was 2017, the same day that Irma hit was our move-in day, which we didn't exercise that, and we moved in a little bit later. And everybody has their street and their idiosyncrasies of as you're learning your neighborhood. And sure enough, my street had an owl perch on it and a little piece of rope, and two little cute fellows were hanging out in there, and I thought, this is just great. And being a professional photographer of all things nature, I took advantage of their posing and had some fun with them. He was a little guy that this was their first nest, and he would go around the neighborhood and pick up tin foil or ribbons or little pieces of colored paper, and he'd dress the edges of his burrow. It was very, very cute. She loved it, I presume. So anyway, they were going to have their first set of nests, and I was driving by them every day because I live on the cul-de-sac. They live on the way out, so I always got to see them in and out. And one day I took a look over there, and there was an iguana, big lizard. I'm not really tuned into what an iguana was, and so I checked it out, and it was harassing them, trying to get in their burrow. And the little owls were shrieking and diving and doing their best, but they're just little guys, and he was a lot bigger. And I said, this is just not right. So I went and checked on what is that and did a little Google search. And sure enough, it finds out that it's an invasive species. It's not indigenous to Florida. Doesn't really belong here. It's kind of a neighborhood bully as far as what they do. And they virtually have no natural predators. And I said, well, I think they might have one.
That is,
That is
awesome.
That is the coldest line that has ever been spoken on this podcast. It's like, they've got one. There's a bald eagle that screeched in the background when he said that. That's good. I like that a lot. I tend to say I like that a lot. But I really, really mean that is a good line right there. That's
Well,
go
what
ahead.
happened is I happen to have the skills to do something about it.
Right.
Okay. Growing up, I grew up on the Pacific Northwest on the coast of the state of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
It's heavily forested and it's very wild and
Right.
you know, it's miles and miles between houses or towns, etc. And so all of us kids were hunting kids.
Right.
And you could call it, if you wanted to be sophisticated about it, a sustenance family. That meant that you did every year some sort of wildlife to augment what you're going to eat. So we always had a deer, and we always had an elk. Every couple of years we'd try to get a bear. Then there's all sorts of birds. There's quail. There's chukars. There's grouse. There's pheasant. There's ducks, and then of course there's fish. And so, as a kid, you do all of those things, and you become pretty good at it. Especially the hunting part, because it's not wide open spaces. It's jungle, but a different jungle than here.
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to learn how to be stealthy, and you're going to be close up to the critters. And so I did that, and then I hunted a little bit through college, and then during college they wanted me to join ROTC. They had a shooting team there, and I wanted to do that, but I really didn't want to do the ROTC thing at that point in time. And then the college offered a civilian shooting team, and I said, I'm in. Right. And so then we got to compete against the Army guys, and they all thought they were really good, but so was I. And so I have a background of being a shooter. Not that I did anything trophy-wise. I've never had a trophy in my life. I've always looked at them as food, and what can we do with this? And so that's where I came from. So I checked out my little pellet gun that I had, the Daisy Red Ryder type thing, and that just wasn't going to work on the iguanas. It just bounced right off them, and they turn and say, "Is that all you got?" And I said, "I think I got more." And so I went ahead and bought one of my more powerful pellet guns. And by powerful, that means that 25 yards, 75 feet or so at full power, and a regular soft 2x4 from Home Depot or wherever, it will go through. And so it's very, very powerful. And I chose a larger caliber, a 25 caliber, because it hits hard, and I get a heavier grain as well. And so, and I've expanded, because as you hunt, you learn.
Right.
Okay. And sometimes it's a very long shot. The longest shot I've ever had on Marco Island is 68 yards, which is a long ways for a pellet gun. 50 yards is kind of like the outside limits for me, and I like 20 yards to 40 yards, which means that 10 yards is too close. And actually your scope can't really see 10 yards, because the barrel and the scope are not on the same plane. They're a couple inches apart. And so it takes a while for those two to become on the same plane, your eye and where the bullet is going. And so as such, I bought another gun, of course, a carbine
Gotta have a
model.
sidearm now too.
And so the carbine model was good for closer in. I have a long distance model, and then I finally invested in a middle grade. And so two of my scopes have video in them.
Oh wow.
Oh.
Which shoots not only video right through, it shoots stills, and it also shoots audio, or it records audio. So you get to hear and see everything that I see.
Is there somewhere that you upload those? Or do you just kind of look back and take notes on what you should do for future
A little of
reference?
both. Okay, taking notes, you can learn a lot by seeing what you're doing. Okay, and so there's a classic line out there that you can learn a lot by watching, and so you need to do that. The act of taking out an iguana sometimes is exactly that. Boom, sleep. Sometimes it's not. Okay, sometimes the nerves go off. I grew up on a farm. We had chickens. We harvested our chickens at times. And yes, if you cut off a chicken's head and put it down, it will run around.
Right.
Okay, it's not alive, but it's acting pretty weird. And so you got to be careful who your demographic is on showing that kind of thing. Okay. I do have one of the scope companies who gave me the scope and said, if you post, we'll think about letting you keep it. Okay. On the second post, they said, keep it.
Cool.
Right. So there is nothing but coyote hunters and hog hunters and thermal and all those guys. And so as such,
We can pause real quick if you want. Is this someone calling about an iguana?
Yes, I killed it.
Oh.
That's an iguana call. That's a special iguana line.
Okay.
Okay. And that iguana line comes in, I know what it is, and I can answer it accordingly.
There you go.
And somebody is looking at an iguana right now saying, can you get here?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And that's how it works.
Could do a ride along.
Into the Jurassic Park mobile.
So back to where we left off is that, there's a group that really relishes it. Okay, and they're mostly nocturnal hunters, and so you're seeing these kind of images, and they're all dark and that kind of stuff.
Like green.
And then I come in and I'm close up because I have scopes that really zoom in close, and you can see their eyes, you can see every scale, you can see everything, and it shows you the reticule. The reticule is the X where the bullet is supposed to go.
Right.
And it shows the reticule going exactly on this part of the brain that does them in, and then suddenly it hits. And so it's rather graphic, so I don't show it all the time, but it's out there for some audiences.
Wow, this is very interesting. I'm really enjoying this conversation so far. So one of the questions that I do have for you, in your experience, what is one misconception that people have about iguanas, or specifically your work, that you wish that people understood more?
It isn't a misconception. It's an opinion that they're perfectly available to them, and I believe in what they believe in. These are God's babies,
Right.
okay? And so there's a certain sect of people that believe that, and as well they should. Okay, I don't have any problem with that. I have a problem when God's babies are messing with other God's babies.
Right.
Okay? And so I'm here as a protector of some things and some of our environment. I'm an environmentalist, and you need to take care of certain things. There's places in the country where certain species have become overrun and they need to be culled. Otherwise, they're going to get sick and it's going to be bad for them. It's also going to be bad for the ecology of that region. And so I look at it a little bit different. There are a lot of damaging things, and we do have just really a scourge of things that will eat them. Okay,
Right.
They are really, really tough.
Yeah.
Okay, there are times that I shoot one, and I go to pick it up to put it in the bag and take it away, and it turns its head and says, "Is that all you got?" Right?
Jeez.
And they want to debate death, and they're really strong, and they have incredible claws, and the tips of their claws are needle sharp.
Yeah.
Right? They can climb right up a screen of a pool screen without a problem. I've watched them climb right up a stucco house or a brick house.
Really?
Okay? The claws go into that kind of little crevices, and it's not a bit of problem. So, they're really a tough critter, well adjusted to the tropics. We are the tropics. This is the only place in the continental U.S. we have iguanas, right? There's none in Tallahassee, yet it's Florida, okay? Because the cold line, the freezing line, is lower than Tallahassee. Mississippi, Georgia, the Carolinas, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, they all have enough heat, but they also have enough cold to kill iguanas. Hence, they're not anywhere but South Florida.
Right.
Okay? And the islands and that type of thing. Right. They originally got here. A misconception by some people, back to your question, is that they all came by pet trade.
Right.
Okay, that's not true.
Yeah.
There's not enough pet trade to give us the numbers that there are here. Okay, there are two other ways they got here. The number one way is agriculture. Especially in the 1960s is when they started. There were no iguanas. There's no old boy. Back in the day, we had these iguanas. There were none. There were none at all. Okay, what we have instead is we have iguanas that came in agriculture shipments and offloaded into the ports mostly on the East Coast. If you look at the density of
Yeah.
iguanas, the East Coast is incredibly dense
Yeah, I
with
was
that.
talking to a couple of people earlier today. Actually, I was talking to my accountant down in the office and saying that we were going to do this interview. And she was saying, it's like, yeah, something has to be done over here before it gets like Miami, because she used to live in Miami, and saying about how dense it is
Yeah,
over there.
yeah, they're very prolific with 50 babies per female per year. It is really adds up quickly, and we'll get into that math in a little bit. And so that's one way they came. People say the hurricanes can drive them in. Absolutely. You know, if they're on some flotsam and jetsam, they can come from the islands and be blown ashore someplace. That'll happen. There's a natural progression of the alpha male. The alpha male has a bit of a harem. He'll have a few girls with him. And then when the boys get a little bit older, you're out of here. And he'll run them off. Okay. And the alphas will fight and all that type of stuff during mating season. They'll keep as many girls as they can, and then the guys that are driven off may take one. And they're forced to go away. How far away? Okay. Well, it may be blocks, it may be a mile. Do that for 60 years. And all of a sudden we have iguanas on the East Coast and West Coast.
Yeah.
Okay. Among other ways of transporting again, maybe on a ship or a truck or a rail car here. And then when that produce is unloaded, so came the iguanas, right? So those are the three basic ways they got here and when they got here.
I'm learning so much. I'm almost dumbfounded. Go ahead.
So I was gonna say, since you do get up close with them, I admire the iguana Dundee look. But when you're out there trying to get them in the bag, and they have that little bit of fight left in them, is there any like protective gear that you wear?
Yeah, I have some sleeves, some anti-cut sleeves that people that are doing a lot of butchering, and they hit their arm with a knife, okay, and the knife doesn't cut because of the sleeves. I wear those occasionally, not often, okay. I wear them when I have to go get one out of the bushes, and they're stickers.
Yeah. That's the bigger.
Smart.
Yeah.
And then I have some gloves that I wear as well. Iguanas, as do many other animals, carry salmonella. Okay.
Oh, really?
And so their blood and their feces carry salmonella, and so you need to be aware of that, and you need to wash up. And so because I shoot them, there is some blood and some liquids and that type of thing, and so you just have to kind of be careful. And so I wear either regular rubber gloves, or I have some other gloves that I wear as well when I handle them. Their claws are just awesome, and so you have to learn how to pick them up, and that's an experience thing. You will pick them up wrong a couple times, and then they will make you pay. Right, and then you'll learn to pick them up right. Okay, and so you have to. Their tails are one of their weapons. Okay, they have spikes on their tails, and they'll hit you with them on your leg. Okay, so they fight that way a lot, and they'll snap at you. There is another kind of iguana called a spiny tail, and the name is very appropriate. It is very spiny all the way around in 360 with spikes. And they're built a little different. They're huskier. They're like a linebacker of them. Their heads are a little bit bigger. Their bite is a lot tougher. And their tail is shorter, but so much more difficult to deal with. And I've only gotten 2 out of maybe, 1,500 or more iguanas that I've removed from the islands in the last few years. 2 have been spiny tails.
Oh wow.
Oh, wow.
But other places, they're more prolific.
So what does a day in the life look like for you? For say it's an iguana hunting day. We did just experience someone calling earlier. If you were in a position where you were taking calls, what does a day in the life look like?
I typically like to play pickleball in the morning, and so I'll
Marco Island's
Marco Island's pastime. I'm a member of the club there by the fire department, the racket club, and I'll play somewhere between 8:30 to 10:30. Okay, and then I will go hunt for 2 to 3 hours at that point in time. I'll leave directly from there at 10:30. I'll check my phone to see if there's any text messages or phone calls that have come in that we've got an iguana. Can you come help? we'll do that. And if there's an iguana in a section of the island, I just take the island and break it up into, let's say, quarters. Okay. Everything I do is by permission. Okay.
Right.
Chief Chasey and I have, an understanding that whenever I go someplace, it's creepy when you have a gun that looks like this. Okay. And somebody walking around, it's, something you need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Often I'll wear an orange vest because I did this research, and 9 out of 10 terrorists don't wear orange vests. Okay. They wear camo.
This
right?
is a
So,
good- yeah.
so I stay out of the camel side, and I go here. But whenever I spot an iguana, I know I'm going to take the gun out of the rig. I call dispatch. Okay. And I just let them know there's a man in the neighborhood with a gun, and it happens to be me. And this is the address. Okay.
Self-reporting.
And so I let them know, so then they can send out a note in case 911 calls come. And I have been swatted a couple times, where people, are afraid of that. And boy, I'm 100% behind those people that call in. Okay. They should. That's why I call in. Okay.
Yeah.
So we can have that kind of thing.
Exercising a great amount of caution is necessary. Yeah.
So if I have a series of permissions, which I do, several hundred of them, okay, I'll go to a section of an island where I've got a phone call, and then I'll go visit those clients per se, just to take a peekaboo to see if there's an iguana on their property. They may be up north, okay. Other times I'll get a call from somebody that has a Ring camera, okay, and they're in North Dakota, and they're saying there's one on my dock.
Yeah.
Right. And so then I can go and take it out and see. So there's different things I do, but that's what I do. Then I go home. I actually have a real job. I own an ad agency called J2 Golf. Okay. It almost is 100% all golf, although I'll do a few things not golf. I recently did the Calusa Garden Club website and a few other things around the community. But so I'll work there, and then lo and behold, I may get a call. And I do a lot of writing, a lot of magazines and articles and such. So if I get a call, I just simply go out, and everything I need is in the iguana mobile, right? And so off I go.
The iguana mobile is so cool.
Yeah,
This is screaming a need for an Animal Planet one-off, like 30-minute to an hour documentary. Just putting that out there into the world, letting God and powers that be know that this is a thing that needs to happen. Anyway, as you were.
So I drive to them. It's a 4-by-6 mile island.
Yeah, you can be anywhere within 5 to 15 minutes.
5 to 15 minutes is what I tell them. So I get there. If it's available, I get it. And if it's not available, I don't. I come back either way. When I come back home, my paragraph is still sitting right there.
Yeah.
Right. And I just pick up where I left off.
And
so
it's perfect because
it works.
It's better than just going, it's like, I'm going to go walk to the kitchen, just see what's in the fridge real quick, and then walk back. It's you going out and getting some sun, getting your exercise in, training your eyes more too. That's great. Yeah.
So I happen to have the kind of work that
allows
it to do.
Which is perfect.
If you want to answer the iguana call, I'm fine with it.
Hello, this is John.
Hi, John. This is Chris from.
Yes.
It's not one of the bigger ones, like a medium-sized one. It's on our dock right now.
Okay. And you're
Always seems to be around dinner time.
always around dinner time. I'll have to start remembering that. Your little fellow is going to get a pass tonight. I'm telling you why, because I'm in the middle of a media interview about Down Goes Iguana. On camera and everything. How about that? So you're on camera too.
You can put her on speaker and let her say hi.
Yeah.
Funny.
There, you're on speaker now. So how about tomorrow? Okay. Call me around dinner time if it's out there, and we'll go. What do you think?
Sounds good. If I see anything, I'll let you know.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's cool. I love
Another
your-
iguana on the dock.
Yeah, no.
And then I get text
He
messages.
gets to live for today.
Like, hey, John, this is Fred over at such and such court. The big mama just came out. There's a pregnant one, and she's sitting on the seawall right now. Can you come? Right. And yesterday I shot her boyfriend,
Oh,
who was a 52-inch male. Right.
they
So
get that big?
I've taken several over 60 inches, in this island.
You've got up to 6 foot.
3.
Nearly what?
Yeah, 6'3". I'm 5'3".
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Because 5 times
Yeah.
12 is 60.
Yeah.
Goodness.
So with them on docks and seawalls, has there ever been like an awkward aquatic encounter where they just kind of swim away?
They're terrific swimmers. They are unbelievable swimmers. And what they really don't know is they've been clocked at over an hour underwater holding their breath.
Really?
Right.
So this is just Godzilla's little cousin.
One of my favorite was one day an iguana saw me coming, and they do, and they've tapped my phone. They know I'm coming, so they know I'm coming, or they hear the iguana mobile. And he was on the seawall, and so he snuck over the edge of the seawall, but I could see his 2 paws because he's hanging by 2
like
paws.
Kilroy.
Right, and so he's off the edge, and then he'd bring his head up to peek, and his head up to peek, and I was going to get him, and I have some pictures I can share with you where I've done just that, right? And he decided to let go. Okay, so he let go, and he's in the water, which is fine. And so I just went over in case, because some of our seawalls have a second ledge down by the water.
Yeah.
Okay, and sure enough, they'll drop down to the second ledge, and they're just fine, depending on the tide. It's available. Well, there was no second ledge, and there was a piling, and of course the piling has a whole bunch of barnacles and oysters and such on it. And he was about 2 feet down, hanging onto an oyster underwater. And I walked up, I looked down, I went, that's a very clever thing to do, right?
Clever girl.
So there it was, just staring up at me, and I gave it a shot to see how far the pellet would go underwater, right? So, yeah, so that was probably the most unusual underwater thing.
Yeah.
But I constantly see them where they'll swim across and then maybe climb up on the seawall, and depending on which canal it is, I can shoot across and take it off from there.
That's what is the most so other than aquatic adventures, what do you think is the most interesting encounter that you've had with one of these iguanas, or maybe a person out when you're iguana hunting?
You're sitting at one of the wildest things that happened. I was here, and typically this is one of the places I come in the morning. This location is actually the original Tommy Barfield home. Okay, so it's kind of a really neat place, and it's one of my favorite places. I wish I had a cup of coffee and I could just hang out here, but I need to keep going. So I sit down and I take a pair of binoculars, and I'll start scoping the trees. Okay, and I looked up and I saw, and this is only happened within a month ago or so, a very rotund female iguana at the top of one of these trees, and I said, okay, all right, we'll take care of that. And so I can set up the scope, and I have my own special little stool, and I picked her off. Okay, thick trees will hang up the iguana. I like to collect them because I freeze them, and I have several places they go. All right, and I'll get to that in a minute, and I'll talk about that. Finish this. So I moved over to try to maybe put one more bullet into her and knock her free, so she'd fall. I could take her. I look over, and there's 5 iguanas in the tree next to her. Right? I take 2 more steps, and there's 4 more iguanas behind where I had gotten her.
Really?
Right? And so I began working my way through all of those iguanas. And at the end of the day, in 30, 40 minutes, I had removed 12 iguanas from where you're sitting right here.
That is crazy. I mean, I don't think I would even be able to probably just naked eye see one with all of the green leaves.
Yes, and you're really onto something. Okay, they camouflage themselves so well. Okay, and a lot of times they understand that there's a person down here, and they'll peek through a leaf or hide themselves, but they're very inquisitive, and they want to see that I'm there, right? And so I've learned what to look for, and there may be a little thickening of the foliage here, right? And the leaves have spaces in between them, but this little set doesn't seem to have spaces because the green body of the iguana is behind it, right? And sometimes they peek through, and sometimes a leaf is covering part of it, but I know exactly where the anatomy is. And I have video where when I shoot, there's a hole in the leaf. and the iguana goes down.
That is so cool.
That's yeah. Now I'm looking behind every corner. Would have absolutely no shot of being able to see them with my eyes, but I've got cataracts, so there's no hope right there until we get a surgery going. But wow, goodness. So what had initially brought you to Marco Island? Before we get into a little bit more
Well-
of the numbers behind iguanas.
I'm a professional golf photographer, and there's a corporation here in Southwest Florida called WCI.
Okay.
And they own a multitude of private clubs. Okay, and so I was their photographer. Among other places around the country and the world. So I would travel from Seattle down into this area. So I knew this area very well, but I also knew all sorts of areas. I did the USGA calendar. I've done several coffee table books, and there's just a lot to it on that side of me. And when Al Gore invented the internet, he said that WW thing is going to be big, right? And that I need to go get golfphotos.com, and I did.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
See, so that'll give you an idea about how long I may have been doing this. Okay. And film was my thing, not digital. I didn't go to the dark side for a lot of years. Okay. So as such, I kind of knew this area. And so when we decided to go ahead and move from Seattle, we honestly didn't have anywhere to go. We packed up the vehicle and pulled the trailer, and we drove from Seattle straight across the country to Virginia, and then started working our way south with no place to go.
Really?
Okay. And just we would go and check out different cities and see if they had things that we would want in our daily life, and then take notes, and then just keep going. And we ended up buying a property here and building here. So that's how I ended up in Marco Island, per se. It had nothing to do with iguanas.
Yeah,
at
no,
all.
not until they were messing with your owls.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of funny. We're coming full circle. I believe our second episode was about burrowing owls, and this I think will be our 33rd episode. I believe.
Well, they have the Audubon Society, which is just a tremendous asset to them. And then several of the people, in fact, on the way here, I got a call of somebody that owns some lands that has several burrows on it. And they're kind of protective, obviously, of the owls, as I am too. And she saw some intrusion of iguanas coming. And so, I try to take care of those kinds of things as soon as I can. Right.
Priority for those.
And help out there.
With them going into the burrows, would they ever mess with a gopher tortoise?
They go into gopher tortoise burrows all the time. I watch them do it, and the tortoises are, they've got pretty good armor, and so they could care less. The only thing I worry about, and I haven't experienced this, but I know that it would make sense to happen, is the tortoise eggs. Okay, iguanas will eat eggs. Just 3 days ago, I was called to a condo association. A pair of magpies were just going crazy. They had a nest in a bush. And they called me because somebody thought they saw an iguana. And yes, the iguana was going into the bush and were going for the nest. And that's what the magpies were having, a little fit over. And so as such, and it's been well documented, they eat eggs. Okay. They're herbivores, but they eat eggs. And so as such, you just have to wonder what's happening down underground. I've never seen it, but I've seen them enter many tortoise burrows before, and it's not the reaction that the owls have, because the owls are defenseless in comparison to the tortoises.
Right. Now, with by the time this episode comes out, either sea turtle nesting season would have just started a few days ago, or is starting in just a few days. Does the sea turtle nesting with all those eggs on the beach, does that change how the iguanas act at all? Because do they recognize that there's a fair bit of food over there? Have they not caught on
It's
yet?
a good question. I'm sure they've caught on. I don't know what kind of predation there is of the sea turtle eggs. I do know that I'm getting more and more calls of iguanas in the berms. All right. In fact, just 2 days ago, I shot one that was 54 inches in the berm. Okay. And a huge goal there. So, and they were really close to eggs there. I'm not going to say that they are doing that. It would make good sense. But, I'm one of those ones that wants to see documentation of it
Right.
actually happening. Right.
Before making any
Yeah.
bold assumptions. So now, moving to a different species, you did make mention of coyote hunters before, and Marco's starting to have a growing coyote problem. We're not necessarily in the removal phase yet, but we are in the phase where they're starting to get a little bit more bold in seeing people out during the daytime. I just saw a video on Nextdoor just a few days ago about someone's a coyote climbing into someone's pool and up around the seawall and all that, and looked actually very similar to iguana videos I've seen. It would, if it were ever to get to a point with coyotes, would you ever switch game?
I don't have a beef with coyotes. I lived with coyotes a lot in the state of Washington. There's they've been there for many years.
Yeah.
Here's the deal: is that this 25 caliber just really has a real wallop, and it could kill a coyote, but it could absolutely wound them, and grievously.
Yeah.
And so they do make air rifles in 30 caliber, 45 caliber, and 50 caliber. I mean, things that they're taking down elk with. Okay, so there's no problem. I could switch weapons. Okay, and they're lethal. It's just that this is a very urban environment, and Marco's going to have a hard time getting rid of these. They're going to have to be trapped, and that's about the only way they can do it.
Yeah.
You can't take a regular firearm and shoot within this environment. And so all the guys that are out hunting coyotes are doing it in the wilds in huge fields, and they're doing it at 100 and 200 yards. Okay, and even sometimes I've watched videos where some of those guys are wounding a coyote, and it just doesn't sit well with me. Okay. So if they asked me, I would probably politely decline. Okay. It's just not something I feel that I would do. I do feel that they're going to have to probably do some trapping just because of the numbers of litters that are being born.
Yeah.
And trapping can allow relocation. Depending on where that relocation site is. It's against the law to relocate an iguana.
Right.
Okay.
Since it's invasive. Yeah.
It's invasive, and it's just it's ludicrous of what it's going to do. And so Florida is well developed, and when you move a coyote to someplace else, all you've done is given somebody else a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
To switch gears back to iguanas, you had mentioned earlier, maybe before camera, that you were just at FGCU.
Yes.
And do you normally kind of prepare like the eggs or the meat for people to try? Is that just like a cool little interview thing you normally do?
That's a cool. It's more of a curio thing. Okay. There are a segment of population that absolutely this is a core food. Okay, and it was as they grew up. Okay, so let's talk about what do I do with these iguanas? I freeze them. Okay, now they're frozen. Now what? Okay, there's a bunch of different places they go. There's a group called the Tampa Bay Discovery Center, and they do all sorts of research on invasive species like lionfish and other things. Right? They are just a great group, and so I will take a cooler and pack it up and fill it with frozen iguanas, and off they go to Tampa Bay for research, and that's just great. Part of their research is dissection with kids. I'm an ex-school teacher. Okay, kids are really important to me, and so we all did frogs in high school.
Yeah.
You put a 4-foot iguana on the table with a scalpel, you really light up some attention. Okay, girls with scalpels are just fabulous. Okay, so as such, and especially if she has eggs, okay, they're bursting with eggs. So that's the second place is education. I have some educators that will say, can you give us these iguanas for our, biology class, that type of thing, junior high and high school. So that's another place, as well as they do dissections there in Tampa Bay. FGCU, I give anywhere between 50 and 75 a year. They have a class, Cultural Studies of Central America. And so it's about all things Central America, and it's a really terrific class. And one of the things about Central America is they eat iguanas. It's a core food. And so if you're going to learn about it, let's experience it a little bit. Okay. So last night was their taco feed. In this case, they started out just by cooking them and tasting them. No spices, no anything. Well, everything we eat, chicken or fish or whatever, we always spice it up. Well, we need to do that as well with iguanas. So they did it with just plain, and they felt across the board that it was more like turkey than chicken, a little richer in taste. Okay. And they'd try it and say, okay, I've tried it. Okay. Now that it's part of a fill your own taco, okay. Yesterday they must have had 40 people there, and there was a big bowl of iguana meat, and you'd fill it, and you put your tomatoes and your cilantro and your cheese and and your sauces, and sure enough, it's taco time. Kids were coming back for seconds and thirds.
Oh.
Okay, because it really is good. And it has more protein than chicken. And so it's a food that you can do. And the eggs are really fluffy. And the professor's wife had done the eggs before, and they scrambled them.
Eggs are all yolk too.
They're all yolk, okay, and they're not a hard shell or soft shell, so you cut it and then you squeeze it like toothpaste, and it comes out, okay, and then you mix it up with just a little bit of milk, and it's nice fluffy scrambled eggs or omelets or whatever you want. Well, his wife is a baker, and last night he told me, he says, instead of doing the frittatas and scram, she used it to bake all these cookies, and they turned out terrific because they were a lot more fluffy, right? And so when the recipe calls for eggs, she was using iguanas.
Wow.
Okay. So yeah, it's a lot of people say, oh, it's just so icky. And I said, well, how does the Japanese cook fish? They don't. It's sushi sashimi, right? And if you tried that on a Western person without understanding, they would say, no way, right? And some still do, but many people have crossed that bridge and says, yeah, it's terrific. And then there's a real expensive, fancy name called caviar.
Yeah.
They're just fish eggs, okay? And people are scarfing them down, put them on crackers, and away they go, right? Once again, it crossed the cultural barrier to say this is okay, right? So there's a lot of things like that we do, and iguanas is one of them. We just aren't accustomed to it, so...
Yeah, because truly, what is so different between iguana eggs versus chicken eggs?
Once you whip them up,
Yeah.
you'd never be able to tell one from the other. And taste-wise, pretty much the same thing. And so... Another area is occasionally I will have some of the Central American guys who know what I do now, and they'll wave at me and say, do you got any iguanas today, right? And so if I have a bag of iguanas, they don't get frozen, right? I hand them straight over, and they take them home. There's childhood times you remember a cold watermelon was so good, and we played with the seeds and we squished them and all that kind of stuff. It's a memory thing. Well, iguanas are the same thing for them. They grew up eating them.
Yeah.
Mom always made them.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of
Pretty soon you're going to have a stall at the farmer's market. We're selling fresh iguana.
Right.
FDA may
Little
have something to
iguana
do with that.
restaurant.
Did you have something you...
Huh?
Oh,
Oh
it
no,
sounded
I
like you
just
did.
I just said iguana restaurant.
Okay.
I was
Oh, yeah.
So
no,
there are
iguana
restaurants in the Caribbean that flat out it's on the menu.
Yeah.
I was just there, dang it.
Yeah, you should have done them. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I will have to try it at some point. We're gonna have to do a ride along at some point too. I want to do a little dock. That'll be very fun. Actually, my last question was about the process of cooking and eating iguanas and eggs.
There's iguana
Hi.
cookbooks out there.
Are there?
right?
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
and if you Google, iguana recipes, there's a whole bunch of them. I mean, it's like anything. It can be a pretty fine cuisine. It really tastes just perfect. And last night, basically, they've switched over again, and across the board, it tastes like chicken, but it's softer because we parboil it. The whole salmonella thing. So, after it's butchered, we parboil it down and then shred it, and then spice it up like in a wok with a whole bunch of spices. Serve it hot. Put it in a taco. Away we go. Okay, so.
So how do you think the community response has changed from when you first started to now, or unless there hasn't been any change?
No, there has. Occasionally, someone will say, "How could you?" and I don't have to defend that question anymore. I have
Yeah.
people that defend it for me. Okay.
Feel that.
And part of that is just the education. I'm a big proponent of education. I recently did for the sailing singles group. Okay. I used to live on a sailboat, and I single-handed all over the Pacific Northwest and up there. And I thought I was going to go talk to a bunch of single-handed sailors, and like me, right? No, these are people that are now found themselves single in life and sailing along. And so it was a
A
slightly
mistaken identity.
a slightly different group, but they were still fun as can be, right? And then at the end, they all stood up. I thought I was going to get a little ovation, but I realized they'd uncovered the food, and so so they're heading that direction. But it was a
great.
fun PowerPoint because that's what I did in my real job. Is I used to lecture all the time and create PowerPoints for myself and other lecturers to develop a storyline. And so I have that, and the men's club has asked me to come and make a presentation, and then somebody in Fort Myers just recently asked me to come and do one of the fifth grade career days. Right.
Aw.
You see, so all of that becomes what I call education.
Yeah.
Okay. And so with education, you can change the mores of the first thought is don't kill that. Right.
Yeah.
And then, yes, this doesn't belong here, and it's actually harming things that you like.
Yeah.
Right. So we come to a truce on 50-50.
There you go. Do you get paid for this, or do you do this out of the goodness?
No. You don't get paid enough to pay a mortgage on Marco Island.
There's most jobs you don't.
Okay.
So
And so so that's never going to happen. But these toys are very expensive, and so is the iguana mobile.
Yeah.
And there's enough money to pay for all the toys, boy toys, okay,
Yeah.
and then some left over. So and then I do some blogging. I have a website, and there's things that there's insurance, and all of those things that you have to deal with.
Oh,
Okay.
I imagine insurance for
The way I work is if I come to your location and you've asked me to come and you sign my permit, okay, and I shoot an iguana, the very first one on that trip is $50. If I take another or another and another, which I've done, then each of those are 25.
Okay.
Okay. It starts over with the next trip that you call me. Okay. When you get to a certain point, which in my opinion is $15, 15 iguanas. Okay. It's a club you don't want to belong to.
Yeah.
Okay. At that point in time, they're all 25. There's no ever 50 again. Okay. But you're in it for 15 or more. Okay. Where you're sitting has been 30. Okay, there's been 30 iguanas killed in this location.
Wow.
Okay. And so as such, that can be expensive. Here's something that I want Marco Island to start doing again is doing matching funds.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to see 25 for everybody and Marco match it. That way the residents are still doing some. These iguanas, they don't belong to this house. They
Right.
can walk right over there and cross that property line. And they do it without any impulse control. They just cross property lines.
Yeah.
As such, they belong to the neighborhood. Every community, including Marco Island.
You can. If you
One
want.
moment, please. Hello, this is John.
Hi, John. This is Vera Team again.
Yes.
Little guy right now on top of the roof. If you're around, if not, he's still little, and I'm not too concerned.
Okay. I'm in the middle of an interview right now, a media interview. In fact, you are too. Your voice is on the interview right now too. And so so tomorrow I am free about this time, and so you go ahead and give me a call tomorrow, and I'll come by and we'll take care of it.
We've actually only got about
I
10
will,
minutes.
as soon as you see him. Good luck with the interview.
Okay.
Sorry I interrupted.
No, we'll see you. Bye bye. No, we're not going to do that.
Okay.
So back to this important point. The city of Miami Beach, which is just above Miami, okay, they had an iguana problem, and they had a budget of $50,000. Okay, it failed miserably, and they quadrupled it. Okay, we used to have a budget of around $5,000. Okay, we had somebody come from Bonita Springs. Okay, he'd come once a week for I think 6 hours and cruise around, and it failed miserably.
Yeah.
Right, it is destined to fail that way. I'm not failing. Okay, I am doing a lot
The
of
free
good
market
here.
finds a way
Okay.
yet again.
So I would like Marco, because all these iguanas actually belong to Marco and the neighborhoods and not to individuals. And it's like a unwarranted tax in
Yeah.
a sense on some people that happen to live in an area where there's more iguanas, or they live by a house where some people say, I love these iguanas, I want to keep them. Okay. And I'm perfectly fine with them loving their iguanas and feeding them and doing all that kind of stuff. I'm not fine with them being the neighborhood nursery.
Yeah.
Okay, where 200 or 300 can be there. Here's a little bit of math. Okay, last year I killed 730. This year I'm 214 ahead of my pace right now than last year. So it's going to be more. 56% of them were female. 409 times 50 is 20,450 eggs not laid because we eliminated them. 20,000 eggs not laid on Marco Island. Tell me that we're not going to have a population explosion.
Yeah.
You see, that's what's happening here. And so as such, we need to try to get this under control before the pyramid gets so wide that we can't control it. Okay. And so Marco, I'd like to see Marco step up. I understand why they stopped. It wasn't working. It was a good decision, but make a good decision again and do something that is working. Okay. And help eradicate those numbers so we can get control. There's a few houses that allow them to be, and there's houses that are abandoned that have a plethora of burrows under them.
Yeah.
I have a cul-de-sac that I've taken 45, probably about 50 right now. Okay, just in this one cul-de-sac. Those people are all paying some revenues that really is not their fault. Okay, there's an abandoned house there, and those burrows need to be stopped. And sure enough, I was there yesterday, and I saw some of the first yearlings that are being hatched now. Okay, this is the end of the egg season right now. Once they're in the ground, they're in there 60 to 90 days, depending on how hot it is, and then out comes the iguanas. The female will back into a hole, dig a hole, back into the hole, drop her eggs, cover it up, leave. She's done.
Yeah.
No more maternal instincts. She's all done. They hatch, they crawl out, and they're on their own. Okay, it's the only time that they are really good for the environment. They eat a lot of bugs because they need the protein, but then they switch over to become pure herbivores after that.
How big are they normally when they hatch?
Just a couple inches, but they grow super fast, and they are brilliant neon green. They are 1/3 body, 2/3 tail, which is straight. Okay, I have a picture. There's a sidewalk right over there, and there's 20 some iguanas sitting on it, and they're all no more than 3 to 6 inches long.
Wow.
And that was a year and a half ago. Hence, part of the reason why I've got so many iguanas at this location is that unchecked breeding. All right, no trapping, and that was before I was getting them out of the trees. Then they just took off.
Yeah. Wow. And then also, it's been it didn't get as cold this winter as it has gotten in recent years.
Let's
as
talk
well.
about
So
that
they
cold,
didn't
because there's some
freeze.
misconceptions about that. Okay, somewhere around 40. Okay, let's just call it 38 to 42. Okay, an iguana will become comatose.
Yeah.
Okay, just boom, and they'll stop moving. It's just too cold for them,
And they're not dead.
and they're not dead at all.
Iguanas
okay?
falling from the trees.
And koalas are falling from the trees. So let's just think for a second. It's really cold outside, and you don't want to go outside, and you have a blanket over you. Are you going outside? No, you're going to hang in bed for a little longer. Before they can fall out of a tree, they got to climb a tree. And if it's really cold, they stay in their bunkers a lot. Okay, so the whole misnomer they're falling out of trees, do they? Absolutely. And so if they're up there and it suddenly turns really cold, yes, they could lose their grip and fall. So it's true. They do fall out of trees, okay? And then they bounce and they just lay there for a while and you can pick them up. A word to the wise, it's cold and you put them in your car with a heater going. Don't do that,
Yeah.
okay? Because you'll have a friend that's not happy about it, okay? So as such, that's one of the things that doing. 32 degrees, 8 to 12 hours, dead iguanas by the thousands and thousands. That hasn't happened here. Oh yeah, a lot of years. You can look it up. When's the last time in Miami or wherever?
I believe it
was
was
it this?
1986.
Yeah. So it's been a long time. Okay, it doesn't matter if you believe in global warming or don't believe in global warming. All you have to do is believe in the fact that it hasn't been cold enough for this many years that we are not killing naturally the iguanas. Okay. I would love it if we would have a cold snap because it would wipe out thousands of the guys and we'd be back to a neutral number and growing again. Okay. So and that's why we don't have any in the north.
Right. Well, let's see. Is there some sort of call to action that you can make to the people? If there's something that maybe people could do to, like, I don't know, is there any way to prevent iguanas on their property, like not leaving certain stuff out? Or
Yeah, there's some call to actions there, but there's things that people don't want to do. Like iguanas really like all sorts of flowers, like a hibiscus and that type of stuff. They love those. Guess who else loves them? We do. Okay, you can neuter your garden and not have any of the things that you love and plant a whole bunch of things that iguanas don't like, and they'll go someplace else. Okay, well, that's not really what you want to do. Okay, you can plug their burrows. Okay, and I really tell people that if you've got a burrow that's going underneath your house, you need to plug that up. Did you kill the iguanas? No, they tried and tried and tried, and they just found a better house next door and moved. Right.
Yeah.
You see, so a lot of the things that we do to
and then also you got to be careful that is in fact an iguana burrow.
Absolutely. You know, and there's a lot of telltale lines. And people can call me at any time and I can tell you whether it is or isn't. Okay. But there's even some shared, as we talked earlier about, do iguanas go into tortoise burrows? Yes. And if the dirt is soft, they leave a line as if your fingertip was going through the sand. They leave that line in a tortoise burrow. They leave that line on an owl burrow. Owls will typically abandon the burrow if they've been raided by iguanas. Tortoises won't. Okay, so I'm not a proponent of filling in every burrow that you see because some of them do belong to species that we really enjoy. Okay, but I can pretty much tell you when I'm seeing an egg burrow or what would be a group burrow. Then and there's lots of lines and there's ways to tell. Okay.
Yeah.
Trapping is mostly ineffective. My favorite story is I wrote an article about trapping and what kind of traps to buy and what kind of food to put in the trap.
It just don't.
Right. And the iguanas just don't go in there very much. And so this one guy says, I bought the trap. I'm cool. All right, I've got this. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And then, I don't know, 3-4 weeks later, he called me. He says, I need you to come and bring your gun. And I said, how come? He says, because every day it lays on top of my trap taunting me.
It just watches.
Right. And so you can trap them. And then you've got a decision. You cannot, by law, move that trap off your property. You have to euthanize it in the trap. Okay. Yeah. Some people don't want to do that. It's creepy. Okay. I can come and do that for you. I have a permit that I can move it all the way to my house, which then says where you must euthanize it. That's what the Florida law is. Okay. You either kill it there or you kill it here, but we don't want them here anymore because we are not able to control them. You, under no circumstances, take to the park and open the trap. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are just about out of time for today. Jordan, do you have anything that you want to ask before we get going here? Because there's so much. Honestly, I would love to do a part 2 sometime because I'm really.
This is very fascinating.
Yeah, I know.
I love it.
This has been one of my favorite episodes so far. I'm very glad we were able to make this materialize. Me texting you 2 days ago, and then actually getting back to you. What was it? Yesterday afternoon, finally. Yeah. Was there anything?
I would say as a last question, I've heard that in a sense they have like a third eye.
There's not an in a sense. Okay. Rephrase the statement. where it's not a question. They have a third eye. Okay. And that eye is right on their forehead, above, between their eyes, up high. Okay. It's a little dot. It is not an optical eye. Okay. It is a motion and shadow eye. Okay. As they're little fellas, they need all the help they can because they are food when they're tiny. Okay. And when a bird swoops down to grab them, you can pick up the motion and the shadow just before the claws get you. And so you might have a shot. Okay. As a full-sized iguana, they don't use it that much. Okay. But yeah, it's there. It's one of the cool features. And then there's this boy-girl thing. My little finger is smaller. My index finger is taller. Okay. If it's a boy and its head is here, then the spines on its back look like this. If it's a girl, they look like this. They're short close to the head. Okay. They have a dewlap underneath their chin.
Yeah.
Okay. The boys have a bigger dewlap and they use it to pick up girls. How you doing?
Yeah.
Like this. And
Hey.
and
A
and the
bunch of
chicks
big
dig
boxes.
big dewlaps.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's what they use
You need
that.
to put that on a T-shirt.
Yeah. Okay. They have a small tympanic membrane. We have a membrane inside of our ear. Theirs is on the surface. Just underneath that is a round spot called the subtympanic membrane. And it is just a glossy spot that has no function. But when they fight, it looks like an eyeball, a big eyeball. So if they're being attacked by a predator, it's, whoa, wait for a second. So it's a little bit of a defensive move that does nothing else. It's bigger on a boy. Okay. On the very top of the head, there's two little bumps. You really can't call them horns, bumps, but they're bigger bumps than girl bumps. Okay. And so those two are there. So when looking at an iguana, okay, you go short spines, no bumps, and you got to have a pretty good eye out for that. Okay. Big dewlap, small dewlap. Okay. Big tympanic membrane, subtympanic membrane, small. All of those things can do boys or girls. But the one that is a dead ringer is you have to pick it up and turn it over. They don't have any junk, right?
Cloaca.
As such, they have a line called a femoral line, okay? And it comes down their thigh, around their knee, and then towards their calf. The girls have the line, boys have the line. But on the boys, there's a series of white little zits, one right after another, all on the line. And they're the pores, and they rub them to mark their territory. Okay, so when you turn it over, if there's a line, of course there is. If there's zits, it's a boy. So those are some of the things that are kind of fun to see to help you identify them. And when they're really young, it's really hard to tell if they have big spikes, small spikes, big dewlap, small spikes. They're just developing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Jordan, do you want to say the famous words that we say near the end to our guests?
Official friend of the podcast.
Yes. We definitely are going to want to have you back on at some point, maybe for the quarter two iguana report. We'll see. But with that, where can people find you if they have an iguana problem and need it solved, or if they need a website made or anything along those lines?
Sure.
If you want to look into your camera and tell them what to do and where to go.
There's two places. My ad agency is j2golf.com.
Is J2 for
John Johnson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like
J
it.
squared, J,
That's awesome.
So j2golf.com is my ad agency, and you can kind of see some pretty interesting things there. And there's a link to golfphotos.com, which is my library. Okay, so that's for the business side there. For iguanas, okay, the name of the company is Down Goes Iguana. Okay, those of you old enough can remember the Thrilla in Manila.
Yeah.
And it was Muhammad Ali versus George Frazier. Okay, and so Howard Cosell was making the call, and somewhere in the fight, Muhammad knocks Frazier down, and Cosell goes, "Down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier," says it over and over again. And it stuck with me all these years because I was a collegiate wrestler, and we would tease each other, "Down goes Bobby," And so when I came to name this, I just said, let's go with Down Goes Iguana. So instead of the entire thing as a URL, it's D for down, G for goes, hyphen iguana. DG hyphen iguana.com.
Cool.
And
That's
the phone
awesome.
number, everything's on there. So as you saw during the interview, there's calls. You call me if I'm available. We all go to Naples. We all do things. I'm in a thing tonight. So Iguana's got to pass tonight.
Yeah. They got one more day. Wonderful. All right. Is there any closing words that you want to say before we finish
No,
off here?
it's just that we're all part of the community, okay? And this is where I live, and so to me, this is my community. This is something I can do, okay? I have a skill set to do this, and it's something that is needed to help protect some of the other things. And also, some people just, there's guys that can do this, and more power to them. I wish there was 5 more, 10 more, 15 more, okay? But there's people that can't, and I can, so I'm here to help that.
Love to come back when we hear that you got a full team going around. That'll be
Well, I don't know about that. Chief Tracy and I have words about that.
Oh, okay.
There'll be no hunting.
No
I
gangs.
just and there's no running around and rolling down your window and popping one and driving off. So yeah, we won't be having that. So
okay. All right.
Well, with that, Ryan, where can they find you?
You can find me at ryanmsullivan.com. That's where you can get links to all of my stuff, all of my social media. You can also find me directly on Instagram at Real Ryan Sullivan. That's RealRyanSullivan. And with that, Jordan, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at jgcraley03. You can also find my work website, which is going to be currentcreationsfl.com.
Perfect. And with that, we also have a sponsor for this episode of the podcast. So let's hear it real quick from Ryan at an indeterminate point in time.
This episode of Good Morning Marco is brought to you by Tyler Buchan of the Golf Group. Located right here on Marco Island, they're your go-to experts for luxury living on Marco Island and beyond. Whether you're looking for a waterfront home with golf access, a condo with stunning beach views, or a private retreat down on Hideaway Beach, Tyler and his team will guide you to your home. Visit thegolfgroup.com to start your search today, or call 239-420-1099. Once again, that number is 239-420-1099. Go to thegolfgroup.com to find out more. Thank you so much to Tyler and his team for sponsoring this episode of Good Morning Marco.
Wow, thank you so much to our sponsors for today's episode of Good Morning Marco. And with that, once again, John, thank you so much for having us
Sure.
today. Well, I guess we had you. Well, I don't know. We had each other.
we had a good time.
Yeah, we had a great time. I really enjoyed it. We went over an hour for this episode, and I tried to do under that, but it was just such a thrilling conversation that we had to keep going. So with that, thank you so much again, and also to you all who are watching, thank you so much for watching. It really does mean the most, and we will see you all in the next one. Bye.